I'm glad you asked that question. When I finished my manuscript and submitted it to the publishing company, the chief editor assigned to me was a 76-year-old Caucasian lady. And I said, yeah, this ain't gonna work out. And she said to me, well, Carlos, we really love it, but we feel like your terminologies are above the head of your target market. And I said, well, that's funny because we haven't discussed target market. Are you suggesting to me black people can't read? And she said, no, no, that's not what I'm saying. I said, well, please explain to me what you're saying, because my book is about life, and if you are looking at this, you are living. That is the target audience.
I wrote this specifically for young women 18 to 25 because at that age, life is just pulling you in every which direction, and everybody's trying to mold young women into being who they think they should be. So that's who I wrote it specifically for, but because it's a mother and daughter story, I get a lot of older women in my age group who like it for that fact of the matter, and also the music from the 80s and 90s, they like that too. And then men like it because it's like the Herman's head of women's fiction. It's like being inside a woman's head. So men kind of like it too for that reason.
I wrote my books basically to reach a general audience. It wasn't pinpointing anyone out. It was for whoever loved reading. Now, what I didn't know was that I didn't write my books for children to read. But I find a lot of my books are in public school libraries. Now, I don't know how they got there, but they're there. But my Lustful Sins book, I actually wrote that book when I was 18. And I find that young people, as well as older people, enjoy that book more than they like any of my other books. And I'm like, wait, I wrote that when I was just a little girl. I didn't even experience life, but I wrote that book. But I didn't release it until, that was maybe my 15th release. And that did better than any of my other books. Wow. Yeah. So no, I don't have a specific audience. I just write for the enjoyment and for anybody else that love to read to enjoy my books.
Oh, wasn't going around, was it?
Sure. No, why not? Come on.
I don't say I have a general audience. Basically, like I said, because I don't write just urban fiction, and I don't like to just say it's Christian fiction because it does have, like a matter of fact, a reviewer was said, well, no, she gave me 3 stars, I think. I remember that. But she was like, well, for it to be a Christian book, it had too much profanity and it was so much death. And I had to think about that, and I was like, because basically what I write is just not Christian. That's why I kind of made up my own genre. I write urban Christian fiction. I write what is happening and what's going on in the world, and my books are for anybody. And you know, there's men out here cheating. There's women out here cheating. There's husbands and killing. These things happen. You know what I mean? I just write for anybody. But what I do want people to know about my work is anything that I do write, yes, it's urban and things are going on, but I also write to have inspiration, because any book that I write, God is going to be first and foremost, and he's going to be mentioned. Not every character is saved, but yeah, there are some saved ones in there. And I try to bring people in. They're reading my book just thinking it's about drama, but little do they know they're learning about they're learning about the Lord in the process.
Let me say something here. So there's a lot of urban fiction writers, and so there's only so many urban fiction stories you can tell. There's going to be some drug dealing, some prostitution, some jail stuff, all of this stuff. And so if you're an urban fiction writer, you're going to hit on those things. But what I like to do is I try to look for an underlying cause. Like, why is this girl turning tricks? What is it that made her decide that that was her only option? Was she abused? Did she get, something happened. And so I like to try to figure it out in the book and try to come up with not a solution, but maybe a cause to the effects that we see. And so I guess I'm targeting women who are messed up and people don't understand why. So that's my target audience.
When I first wrote my Deadly Temptation series, my premise was
changing what I thought urban fiction was, because I grew up enjoying like the Sister Soldier and Zane and all of those wonderful people. But here it is, I'm 23 and I just can't stand to see the same thing. So I took a leap of faith. I said somebody's gonna hate it or they're gonna love it. And I get more hated because my books aren't what people assumed would have been urban fiction, but you have those select few that really do enjoy the difference. It's, you know, like a breath of fresh air. So what my premise now is, I'm gonna really try to bridge the gap between street lit, and I think that there needs to be a differentiation between the two, because urban fiction is just like they're saying, it's broader than the guns and the violence and all of this thing. So as of right now, I'm starting this little hashtag campaign called Contradiction to Urban Fiction. And I wanna push that because I think if more people are aware, we'll step away from that stigma of what urban fiction is and understand that it's so much more to it, because I don't ever wanna be labeled as somebody who writes the same thing like everybody else. I wanna be different. So that's what I would think.
Hey, can I say something on that? Okay, but you knew I was gonna get out. When I hear people talk about urban street literature, it's the same thing: drugs, money, sex, lies. Okay, that's life. You live around that every day. You see this every day. It's a part of life. Now, but my thing is, I do write urban street literature, but my books are different. How I can say my books stand out from anybody else's books? Because my books are straight street, but it don't involve sex, lies, and money being the only concept of the book. You got family. I have a series, Ghetto Love series. Everybody, I've received nothing but good reviews, and it's a 6-book series. How did I continue a 6-book series without the book just basically being about drugs? Because I don't believe drugs was mentioned in Ghetto Love, but it's dealing with a mother who showed her daughter's love in a different way that you wouldn't expect a mother that loved her children would treat her children. But it took 6 books for me to come up with every character. She had 6 girls. Each character had their own way. You had one daughter that was selling her body because her mother introduced it to her. So you had one child that was a good girl that wanted to go to school but bring her family together. This is urban street literature. Things that happened, they were in the projects. That's urban street literature. But it didn't have nothing to do with drugs. So just because when you hear urban street literature, don't mean that everybody is just writing about drugs or the same old thing. Because we can all have the same title, and I bet you're gonna get a different story out of each one of us. So you can't sit there and say, oh, urban street literature is about the same thing. You have to read from different writers, and find out what their story is about before you can judge it. Don't label mine the same as anybody else's, because when you read mine, you're gonna find something totally different than what you would expect, especially from reading from my titles.
All right,
Can I say something?
of course.
When I decided to write a book, I knew I could write a street literature book in my sleep. So I challenged myself. I didn't even write a book about urban literature. I wrote a book about slavery. I wrote a book about the Civil War. And the guys who read my books, they say, man, thanks. Thanks for giving me something to think about. Thanks for teaching me about history, you know, and explaining different things, you know, that I didn't ever think about. So I really challenged myself, because when I used to tell people that I wrote a book, that's the first thing they say. Is this a nigger novel? That's the stigma that comes with the book, you know. So I wanted to do something different, and you know, hopefully, you know, it sticks.
To add to what he said, it's funny you say that, because I was at a school speaking, and the librarian came up to me and she said, I really appreciate you writing this book, because we don't have any black males that write anything but urban literature. And we want books about life lessons, because we have males missing in school, so at least we can have your books. And so hence, you know, they adopted my book. So it's good to hear a fellow brother doing the same thing. And there's nothing against urban literature. It's just that I think some people see that it's an easy sell or comfortable market, and so that's where they go. And then you start to abandon, you know, some of the other things we can do. I mean, we're some of the most creative people. No, we are the most creative people on earth. So we need to not go to one direction, you know. And we need to not make us feel bad because we go somewhere different. You know what I mean? You know, we're in a society now that people make you feel bad for doing good. And it just blows my mind.
And to piggyback, I'm from the projects. I grew up in Millbrook, and then I moved to Mitchell, a better project. I know in one floor in a project building in the South Bronx, you have 8 families who all live different lives. You have a nurse, you have a vet, you have somebody who is selling drugs, and then you have somebody who works 16-hour days. So there's so many different stories that can come out of the projects or happen in the projects. So that's what I try to do. I wrote about characters from the projects who were gifted students, and one of the most gifted drops out of college to support a boyfriend, and she pissed everybody off, excuse me, in the process, so.
All right.